Hi, I'm Monica Machera-Philpott. I am the Executive Director of Common Ground Charter School in New Haven, Connecticut, and a 2022 Building Hope Impact Award winner for community engagement. And I'm here today with some of the 2024 winners. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we are going to be talking today about organizational structure, which I'm really excited to learn more from all of you about how your schools are structured, et cetera. So I know a little bit about your schools from reading your materials. I'd love for you to share what is your top level leadership structure? So sort of like what are your top two layers? And then share something else about the way you're structured, either staff or programmatically, that is unique to your school. And Peter, I'm going to ask you to start.
Okay. Peter Wazorek, I'm the director and one of the teachers at Northwest Passage High School in Coon Rapids, Minnesota. And we are a teacher-powered school, which means that we have a very flat hierarchy. I have the role of director, and so I do a lot of the things that maybe in a traditional school a superintendent would do, the connections with the Department of Education, and sort of the paperwork and legal kind of things. But then beyond that, it's a very flat hierarchy. We make all of our decisions at the teacher level. We have a teacher majority school board, and so I do have leadership team, but that rotates with staff, and we have a lot of different committee work that happens, and all the functioning of the school happens really at the teacher level.
Awesome. And was the director role in the original design of the school?
Yeah, this is we're wrapping up our 25th year. And when we started, we had a director. When I took over as director 13 years ago, we had the conversation about whether we wanted to go fully teacher powered and not have a director. And the team decided, both at the staff and the board level, that we really wanted to have someone to make sure that nothing slipped through the cracks, that we had all of the sort of functional pieces happening, but that we wanted to keep all of the tenets of teacher-powered schools.
Hi, Sharna Boquet of Vimenti School. I'm on the executive team of Vimenti School in Puerto Rico. We are a whole family model. So when the child enrolls, the entire family unit is enrolled in the school. So that leads us to a different leadership model than perhaps a traditional school. We have a social pillar, which is around social and emotional wellness. And so that team of leads reports up to the executive team. And then we have a more traditional two principals, an education lead, and a support services director that is really child focused. But I'd say in the intersection of those two is where we're pretty unique. And so the case management team is really working toward the family stability, because we understand that when the family is stable, the child performance and academics go up. And we live in high trauma, and we live in a high trauma neighborhood. And so the teachers are not having to work through all of the emotions in the class without the support of that structure helping them. So I'd say that's partly unique.
Hi, Stephanie Becker. I'm the executive director at Amy Beale High School in downtown Albuquerque, New Mexico. Our school is also 25 years old, and it's been through a few iterations, but we have a consensus-driven leadership team that we put together that kind of takes care of different areas of the school. And so that leadership team includes the executive director, who I have to be, or that person has to be facing inward, looking over the school, but also facing outward. And then I have two partners who are deans that are sort of looking at two parts of the school: assessment, curriculum, and social emotional needs and discipline and things like that. But along it's very lateral level, we have the director of special education, and then we devote resources to two directors that oversee the mission. So we have service learning, which would be the director of community engagement, and dual credit and scholarship, which would be the director of college engagement, which means, and really as a leader, I cannot make a decision all on my own. We have to share the wisdom of everybody. And we also use our teachers to get feedback and input. We're a school who meets. We're highly collaborative. We have over 20 days a year of professional development where we gather and collaborate. And that's remarkable, actually, in many ways. And so it's small enough to where everybody's voice is honored and considered when we have to make big decisions.
I'm Buffy Cushman-Pates. I'm the executive director of SEEK's Public Charter School in Honolulu. I'm excited about this topic because I really find it super interesting to hear how other people do their organizational structures. And I'm interested because we're in the middle of a transition right now. So we're in our 11th year. I started as the founder and school leader. And then as we grew, just a school leader and a school manager. And then as we grew, we realized we needed some more specialized positions. And then around the same time as I had my second human child in this process, realized that I couldn't be both inwardly facing and externally facing as the executive director / school leader. And that's when we made an executive director role and then had a school leader. And at the time we thought we were imminently, this is pre-pandemic, about to add a few additional campuses. And so we made an executive director and we were gonna have a school leader of each of our small campuses and different middle school and high school. And then the pandemic hit, but we've been sort of operating with executive director and school leader, but we're still just our original middle school of about 180 students. And what that means is that there's kind of like a couple of layers between all of the internal facing stuff is the school leader's responsibility and all of the other leadership there. And it made me as the founder and the visionary for it really pretty far away. Also, this school leader role, it's just a lot of different pieces of it that I know from having done it myself. And so we just are in the middle of a reorg right now. And next year, I'll still be the executive director, but we'll have a director of teaching and learning and a director of school operations. And then the three of us will function as the sort of organizational leadership team, in addition to the director of advancement, facilities manager, those types of things, right? But that leadership structure is what we're moving into for next year. I would say say one other thing that's interesting about or innovative about our school. It's that we have teacher leadership roles that we built in. They were built in from the original model, and then we had to modify them. But now we've got teachers who step up and say they want to be the person who sort of stewards the key vision elements of our school, from like somebody who's a portfolio defense lead, somebody who's the lead for our EQS projects, our project-based course, that those teacher leaders steward those vision elements and work with the leadership team of the school to make sure that that's consistently implemented.
Sharna, I didn't catch whether your school has an executive director.
We do have an executive director that oversees the entire Vimenti model. And so inside that Vimenti model, you have three pillars. You have the education pillar, the social pillar, which includes wellness, emotional health, where the case managers are housed. And then you have the economic area, where you're working with adult and workforce and employability programs for the family. So within that executive director, then you have an executive team. And then you have department leads that have tiered systems. In the school, we have principals and a director of support services. We also are very heavy on professional development. We find that we run a full month in the summer of full-time professional development in addition to hours during the school week.
So thinking about your senior leader role in your school, which is an executive director, and in your case as a director, what are the unique value adds? And I ask this question because I suspect it's different. Like, I'm an executive director, you're all senior leaders of your schools, and I bet we do really different jobs. So curious, like when you think about your role or the role of the senior leader at your school, and what makes that role necessary and what's the unique value add of that role, can we each share a little bit about what that is?
I hold the vision, and as we've talked about, like those vision elements are really pretty nuanced, which has some frustrating implications for the sustainability of the school. But I'm actually hopeful that this reorg that I've described, where the director of the teaching and learning also has real clarity about those vision elements of the school to keep those going. So it's not forever reliant on me to making sure that those come to fruition. But we also find we have to do fundraising to help supplement our budget, and funders like to hear directly from the source, the visionary, the founder. And so those are value adds that I have. Personality, sort of strengths wise, I'm both a big picture and a detailed person. And I don't know about your schools, but running charters in Hawaii is so much nuanced detail of like this level of paperwork that goes here and here and here. And I just have the institutional knowledge at this point. And so I can tell to the business manager, you got to make sure you do this form this way. And I can tell this person. So the executive director kind of is the person that says, I know enough about each of these roles within the organization that I can help make sure we don't fall apart.
Who's the instructional leader of your school?
That's a great question. It has been the school leader, and now it will be the director of teaching and learning. But I really wish it were me.
I get that. I see that. Peter, go ahead. Why don't you share?
Yeah, I think when you ask the question, how do you have a leader, a director? Honestly, no one else wants it. Is what it really came down to
Yeah.
on some levels. Like honestly, on that is I spent 7 years as an advisor and teacher, but prior to that, I spent almost 20 years in 2 other leadership administrative roles as a camp director and as a youth coordinator. And so in each of those positions, I kind of moved up along the way and found myself in those leadership roles. And then when I decided what I really wanted to do was be in the classroom, circumstances kind of came up and the former director left. And we had to make some decisions as a team. And we did have that conversation about, do we want to really flatten and do a full teacher powered, divide up the jobs? And all of us really felt like there were too many things that could fall through the cracks if we did that. And so I kind of fell into that role again, and have been doing it for 13 years.
So what do you hold that your rest of your team doesn't have to
Yeah.
hold?
So, like on sort of my shoulders are all of the requirements from the state and all of the assurances and our work with our authorizer and making sure all of those reports and those kind of things so that the teaching staff can focus on students. It's been tough sometimes because my heart is still in working with students. I negotiated when I took the position on that I would still teach 1 class a year. We're fortunate we run 6-week terms, and I was able to like kind of find a sweet spot sort of in the middle of the year when like all the beginning and end of the year kind of chaos wasn't there and all the reporting and things where I can still teach. I'm a biology teacher, and so I can still teach a course for that 6-week time. I still run a few groups and things, but I think oftentimes I think I'm spread way too thin. And if we were a bit larger, I could add some more layers. We added a dean of students for the first time 2 years ago, and she's amazing at dealing with sort of student support needs, behavior, parenting, kind of things like that. And so that took some of that off of my shoulders. Of course, the void got filled very quickly with other things, and that external kind of piece is there, and that push-pull between the internal and the external is definitely a tough one to manage.
And how would you answer the question of who's the instructional leader of your school?
I think that one is really a teamed approach because we're a project-based learning school, we're high school, and students do much of their own project development. We kind of set the stage and address the state standards, but we also work as a team with that. I do have one of my English teachers and math teachers as our leads for that, so that they're really focusing in on making sure we're meeting all of the math and the reading literacy needs. But it's really a teamed approach.
I'm kind of curious, do you have to search for funds? Do you do the fundraising, or do you have somebody who does that?
We do very little fundraising. I've been able to manage a budget, but some of that is taking on a lot of other responsibilities to make that happen. It's one of those things where absolutely I wish we had more and I had time to do it.
Yeah.
But something has to give. And yeah.
Stephanie, do you want to share about your structure and your ED role?
It's, as I said before, I sort of, as the ED, I have to focus inward and outward. And my trajectory was kind of interesting. I started as the Spanish teacher 15 years ago. So the school had already been in place for 10 years and they were kind of undergoing some organizational restructuring. But I then, after just a couple years, became the director of community engagement because that was my passion, and working in the community was enormously fun. And I happen to like fundraising. I must be one of the weirdos in the world. But so I was able to combine those two kind of passions and talents to work through it. And then I guess it's now been almost 4 years that I've been the executive director. So I still love teaching though. I teach the senior project class when I can. And so it's hard, and I love watching my colleagues teach. So I observe, actually, I'm the sort of teacher leader for the math team and the Spanish team. And so, because I'm the one that can understand what's going on. But so I love being involved in watching, teaching, and learning as well. Nonetheless, there isn't a day, I don't know about you guys, but I never have the same day once, twice. Like it's always something different. And it could be dealing with authorizers. I'm sure I'm talking to the PED at least once a day for something. But I have a team, and I've always said this to the whole team. The reason my job is manageable is because I can trust that you're going to do what you say you do. And I try to stay out of your lane, even though everything is our lane, isn't it? But I'll let you take this lane. If you need support, I'm here. I got your back. And thankfully, nobody drops the ball. So we have a really strong team. So I see my role as support. I like to grow our leadership from within. And that's been quite exciting to see first year teachers grow and then become leaders within the school itself.
And who would you say is the instructional leader of your school?
We have two instructional leaders, one who sort of oversees the humanities, as it were, the reading and English language arts and history, and then another for math and science, although I support the math.
And they report to you?
Yeah, they all report. Well, they report to the lead team. So we have a lead team that meets a couple times a month, just checking in and making sure all the decisions we have are, again, by consensus, because I'm not one who really believes at all in micromanaging. And I don't believe that our colleagues appreciate being micromanaged. So it's that confidence and trust in working with them and supporting them and knowing that they'll come to you and say, oh my gosh, I can't do this. Please, please, please help me. Or I got this, just show up and everything will be all right.
Sharna, can you share a little bit about the ED role?
Sure. So Barbara Rivera, who's our executive director, she was a part of the original design of the Vimenti model. She is both a social worker and a program design by history and background. So we spent almost 2 years before we opened our school looking at logic models and how we were going to intersect the different pillars. I actually moved to Puerto Rico to be a part of that build because when we were looking at a model at that time, charter schools were not legal in Puerto Rico. And so I oversee the fundraising and the partnership arm, but I worked alongside Barbara to make sure that we could build a model that could be sustainable. That was part of our pilot. And so I've been with the project also since the beginning. When we launched, we were 25% public funded and 75% private funded. We're a phase-in school, so we started K-1, and now we're growing a grade a year. So our leadership structure has evolved because of that. And I think we're facing the same thing you are now at this mid-sized school. Mm-hmm. We're saying, wow, we're going to be at 600 when we're at capacity. We have the needs like administratively already, but we have to phase that in. We had to look at an executive line to help us really think about our different pillars and our intersection points. So we've looked a lot at also as the first charter school in Puerto Rico. And for anybody who went through a charter authorization, if you weren't a charter allowed state and you transitioned into one, I would say that almost 75% of Barbara's time as the executive director is spent dealing with government and the charter movement. We've had a lot of slowness in getting it where it needs to be. We're still not at per pupil parity, for example. So a huge burden falls on private revenue every year. But she was one of the founders of the charter association. So we've started a charter association. We now have 12 charter schools in Puerto Rico from one, which was us. So the movement is growing, but a lot of her time is still focused around things that are external to what she would prefer to be doing and what us as the leadership team would be preferably doing, which would be focusing inward on our children in our school.
Yeah. And who would you say is the instructional leader at Vimenti?
So yes, we have. So Barbara was a part of the logic model team, but from classroom instruction, initially we used external sources to help us build the curriculum. We now have a director of education full time. We very much have a cohesive model of partnership with our principals and with our teachers. We still do use external resources to think about the curriculum because the intersection is for the whole family. We need to make sure that in our teaching models, it's relevant to that differential from just academics.
So I'm going to ask you to think about a couple things. So we've heard the phrase, right? We wear many hats. It is very true that charter schools, with innovation, we were talking about this in the last conversation, like with the innovation and the freedom comes great responsibility. And often really difficult choices of where you put your resources. And so we think about a couple things. How do you use your structure and your staffing model to safeguard instructional leadership, instructional excellence, coaching, whatever it is that makes teaching and learning good at your school? How do you use your structure to make sure that that is sacred? Other question is sort of, where have you learned to be either creative or give yourself grace in regards to maybe not doing everything to the 100% or finding ways to outsource things? So there's no way that I can oversee a fully accredited child nutrition program while also making sure that we get reaccredited every year, while also making sure that we do all the reporting for ESL and special ed and all the things, right? So I make some choices. I'm curious to hear from you all what some of those choices are, or even places where you found opportunity to outsource something so that you can spend more time focusing on your community.
I can go first in terms of, preserving that instructional core. Essentially, that is the reason for the reorg that we're doing for next year, is because when you have these roles where you have to wear so many hats at once, then you really can't do all of them well. And I think a director role, part of our job is to just be like, taking the hats and wearing them, but knowing there's other people that wear those hats most of the time, right? And I think executive director is all of them. But I wanted to make sure that there was someone in my school whose job it was to preserve those fundamental values of what learning looks like, about meaningful learning experiences for students and teachers at our school, and wanting to make sure that that's the thing that perpetuates at our school. And so I basically made sure that we have a position who's responsible for that.
I was going to say, I can piggyback off of that. Again, from initial leadership to a growing school, we also realized that operational management was crucial, and we were seeing that the principals were getting really brought into things, and even the new director of education. So our operational director has taken over a lot more of that responsibility, and you can see the shift that's happened in the principal empowerment and the director of education empowerment. I think one of our biggest ahas was we initially thought we would have about 25% enrollment that would be on IEPs. And in some of our classes, we're up to 50, 51. That's a different structure that's needed. And so we needed to then find money to add a director of student supports. And so we've had to look again at that layer and how does that shift the director of education to the principals, to the director of student supports, while protecting the executive director's time. So those have been learning lessons for us that are still evolving, I have to say. We're doing much better. That all hit around COVID too. So then coming back out of COVID, trying to think about how you structure has been really crucial.
We operate a lot of things on committee level. And so, when we say directors have a lot of hats, Our teachers wear a lot of hats as well. And so, we're in the process of doing some additions to our buildings. And so there's a building committee that meets. And I serve on that team, but I'm just a member of that. I have some specific things that I have to take care of on that, but that committee really does the majority of the work with that. We've got a staff development committee, and we've got pretty much everything has some committee. Everyone serves on a couple of different committees.
Do your committees have specific protocols or structures that allow them to function in this really sort of egalitarian way?
Yes and no. I mean, we want to make sure that we're keeping good notes of things, and that we have someone who is the lead on that committee, so that we, make sure that there's a calendar and time allotted for those things. But a lot of it is pretty organic. I am very blessed to have a lot of longevity on our staff team. We have a number of us who've been there 20 plus years of our 25, and the majority of the staff have been there 12 to 15 years. And so I really have a lot of institutional knowledge. We've sort of developed this together. Those of us who were there from, the first 20 years or so talk about, we were there in the blood, sweat, and tears years, right? We used to drive vans for transportation when we first started. We did all of the lunch duties, all of those things. And so it's really easy to sort of say, like, this is our school. We want to do it. There's a lot of buy-in and commitment. Obviously with that, there are those trade-offs, and you have to be careful about teacher burnout and, who's there when. I think we also are really good about sort of looking at the life cycle of our staff. Where are you at? If you're, have a younger family and some more commitments on things, you may have a little bit less for the next couple of years. And we've kind of evolved through that, where we're just sort of intuitively are kind of like, yes, you can pull back a little bit. You're going to take on a little bit more. And we've just been able to do that without a whole lot of top-down, like, have to kind of things.
We also have a good bit of staff that are still around even from before my time, which is remarkable. It's nice to have new and invigorating staff that come in. And I think part of our support and excitement around instruction is that we have this, our PD days are actually called Ghost Week, and that's get our stuff together, if you know, GOST.
That's awesome.
But every ghost, we have at least one or two, and we all meet together and then give some special time for planning after. But the most, I think, impactful moments that we spend are when we really reflect on our teaching and our kids' learning. And so there's always going to be somebody who either we've done a video or we have something new, but we share our best practices with a pretty, I want to say not rigid, but a very specific protocol depending on what we're looking at, so that we can get as much out of that share as possible. The other thing I think that helps is that we invite each other into each other's classrooms. And so we share our practices. And I think the other thing that, at least for me, and I kind of keep spreading that with my colleagues, is that we have to be relevant educators. We can't get stuck in old models. And so just even bringing some little teeny tiny tweak to your classroom instruction is so exciting. It's a way to really support each other. And the norms that we hold when we gather are pretty simple. It's, we have a kind of a saying, we're like, look, don't, like, just watch your airtime. Because, we've been in faculty meetings before. We always start on time and we always end on time. I mean, we are ruthless in our facilitation in that. And the best of all is assume best intentions. And when we take that to the table, we can all get to work. And sometimes, sometimes I'm sure y'all, we feel like a Seuss figure with all of the hats on our heads. But if we can share them with our colleagues and they'll take it on and then share it, it makes for an effective, I think, great place to work. We've been named a best place to work in New Mexico 3 years in a row. So
Congratulations.
Yeah,
That's
it's
great.
my colleagues for sure. But it makes a difference when you have a lot of trust And, like your group project, everybody's going to share on it with you. You're not the only one having to do the work.
I did want to talk a little bit about capacity because I've heard a lot of different ways in which your schools share decision making, teacher power, right? And I think one thing that I worry about and notice is um, the educator's desire to have agency, to be involved in decision making, to collective, decision making sometimes is in tension with the educator's need to have a sustainable job. And those things shift. I love that you mentioned that at different stages in our lives, we can give different amounts of ourselves. So I'm curious how you all think about, or some best practices you can share about how do you balance that, help your staff balance shared leadership with sustainable work for themselves. And then I am going to ask a leader focused question on that, but this one's really at the whole staff level.
I think when I get new applications in, like I said, I don't have to luckily do that a whole lot. But when I do, it's always a conversation about sort of the different worlds. If you come and work with us, there is a likelihood that you probably aren't going to make as much money as you would in a large district school. And you're going to have some different roles and responsibilities that are really defined on what those are. If you come to work with us, like our students, you're going to have a lot of autonomy. You're going to have a lot of say in how things work. You're going to join a team that really is collaborative and likes to work with each other. And I like what you said about that. I feel that's very true with us. And so it is that decision that you have to make as a staff coming in on what do you want. We run an advisory model where you have a small group of students that you get to know really well. I have colleagues who work in the district school who see more students in a day than our staff have on campus at any time. And so the difference between that, we manage a lot smaller class sizes. So I think the trade-off, you just have to kind of put it all out there and say, which side do you want to be on with this, and what do you value? What do you want to be a part of? And I think the staff who stay really become a part of that school culture and that team.
I think something that we have also learned from startup to today, we really now explain the model as a part of employability. So if you are used to a traditional teaching model that doesn't interface the whole child, we really need to help explain what that means, because in some ways it's very empowering, in some ways maybe not, right? So you're taking on more in some way because you're really taking on the wellness factor of the entire child's being. So the social work team and the teaching team are very interconnected. And we also run a small class ratio size. We 1 to 10. We have 2 teachers in a classroom of 20, and then we have pods where they pull out for different instructional learning. But they also know that they have this support system right beside them that's really helping remove barriers. So, for example, in health, we screen all of our kids as a part of our admission. Well, after post-admission, we do barriers to learning screenings. And so 85% of our kids are having their health issues managed proactively. That ups average daily attendance. That inspires teachers to continue to learn or teach because the kids are actively participating. The energy level is different because you're not having absenteeism from chronic asthma. So I think the infusion of the entire wellness of the child creates a whole separate kind of a longevity with teachers who really appreciate and enjoy it. It also has really helped us grow in how we recruit, because it's a nuance comparatively.
my colleague who's here with me today, I've been trying to grow into leadership roles, and she just says, nope, I am really happy doing exactly what I'm doing. So I think it's a series of intentional conversations that you have with your colleagues. And I mean, in a small school, that's really simple because you can drop in during their prep period and check in. But it's so funny. I don't know why I have an office, because I am never in the office, because I'm always in somebody's classroom or somebody else's office checking in and making sure they're where they need to be or what they need to do. And so, and then also offering the opportunity to grow or offer, some solutions. And so, when there's a problem for us to nosh on, we definitely take it to as many people that want to be a part of that decision, and consider them all with care and deliberation, and then sort of move forward that way.
To some degree, I think that's really on the teachers to balance, right? They have to balance. One of the values of our school is balancing opportunities and limitations. And a limitation we all have is we all have the same number of hours in a day, right? 24 hours in a day, and we all have the things that we have to get done, right? And so you can either be like your colleague who says, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do these things, right? Or you can be the person who says, I want to be involved in this decision, and this decision, and this decision, and this decision. You say, well, you're going to have to give your time to that, right? Because that is the trade-off, and you're invited to provide input.
Yeah.
But we can't build school time in to have every person in the school. I have lots more questions about your school because I philosophically completely aligned with it, but in reality, we have not been able to, and it's a shift over the years, right? In a startup year, we were 6-7 people. We all could be involved in all the decisions, and now we're not.
Right.
It's not realistic anymore because we just couldn't get all the things done that have to get done.
So I promised I'd bring it back to you all as leaders. So I want to do that. Thinking again about that capacity question and the many hats that we wear. And knowing that this is going to be seen by other leaders, aspiring leaders or current leaders, what advice do you have for other leaders about, based on your experience, about where you can sort of preserve your own capacity and your own sustainability in your roles, given all this? What's one tip that you'd give somebody else about how to do that?
You have to know who you can count on, who you can call in the middle of the night or the middle of the day, and just know that those are the folks, that they have the resources and that they can have your back, and making sure that you maintain those relationships. I mean, I certainly don't only call with something that I need. I make sure that if they need something, I'm available to them. So there's a reciprocity and a kind of a kindness and sharing of whatever needs to happen. And so even with the state, even with dealing with, Charter Schools Division of NMPED, there are folks there who really want us to succeed. And so you ally yourself with those people that want you to succeed, even in the legislature, like, oh, I know this one is hot for charter schools, and whatever I can do to support you, then you'll come in and see the good work that we're doing. But knowing who you can call when things are going sideways, and being able to share that burden is probably one of the best tips I can give folks.
I would say both empowerment and delegation, but delegation in a way that doesn't lose camaraderie. So there's a balance, right? Especially when you're in a growing school, we are also going to begin replicating components of the model. So we're going to be a much larger entity than we are today. So as executives, how do you continue to hold not the fiduciary in a financial way, but in a content way? How do you keep that whole with being one leader and making sure that you can empower, you can delegate, but you have to know who you can count on. Your team along you has to share the same values that you have.
The people that I go to for love and sustenance, in addition to some good people I can call, is my family. And so it's having really hard edges about protecting my family time. And I do that in a couple ways. One is that I don't check email on the weekend.
Amen.
I don't check email on the weekend, and I try not to at night. But the other piece related to it is that I'm really adamant within our school community is that if we're communicating about work, we're doing it in work systems, whether that's work email or work GChat. We can chat with each other, but having a different system. So it's not in my iMessage. So I'm not sitting there eating dinner with my family, getting a text, thinking it's going to be from my sister, happy birthday. And instead it's from a teacher who has an intensive question, because I am not able to turn it. As soon as work comes into my brain, it's just spinning in my brain. So I have to protect my family time, because they're the ones that fill me up and like make it so I can keep going back to work the next day. So putting really hard edges around that with the digital systems. Yeah.
I just want to add, because I've always had the mantra with all of my colleagues, it's bandwidth, knowing your bandwidth, and understanding and keeping firm boundaries. So bandwidth and boundaries. And I do try to model that too. I feel like it's important.
I have had a hard time like creating that balance, but like when I don't, I feel like something, is off with me. And so like I'm constantly kind of doing those things, but at the same time working with all the staff to say, no, you're free. I'm not going to call you on these things. I'm going to be thinking about it, but I want to preserve your time. And so I really, that's one of those things that I'm constantly working on, is how to slow my brain down to take the time to do those things. But I find, that's where I get a lot of my energy too. And I have a hard time saying no. And so it's not even just school things. I'm on several other boards and things, and doing all those things. But when you did talk about like, who do you reach out to and what do you do? I do have a group of other charter leaders, because it is lonely at the top. And even though we have a very flat structure, you still have all those responsibilities. So I have a group of 5 other bearded men who are our Council of Beards, the Council of Beards, who have a text chain and a group. And we are constantly checking in with each other to say, what do I need to do about this? Have you heard about this? Is this something I have to take seriously? Or can we just kind of let that go? And so having that support system has been really important.
Yeah, it's smart that you guys have. We started the Public Charter Schools of New Mexico, which is a fabulous consortium of charter leaders, and doing that is going to save you guys.
Agree.
Critical.
I agree.
They've been so helpful.
I would sort of knit those two things together and say, know yourself. I know we've talked a lot about vulnerability today, and I appreciate all of you making yourselves vulnerable and sharing. And I look forward to learning more about your schools.